This is a video lesson on multiplying algebraic expressions. And in this video, I'm going to look at a few different ways to multiply. The first one, which should be a review, is how to multiply two monomials together. Then how to multiply a monomial with a polynomial or monomial times polynomial. And finally, how to multiply two binomials times each other. All of this should be review, but we'll go through the procedures anyways. So first up, multiplying monomials. Remember that a monomial is a single term. So this is a monomial. Doesn't have a plus or a minus and then another term. All of this together, even with the variables and the coefficient, that's called a monomial. This is another monomial. So if you look at the breakdown of what we have in this expression, this guy's a monomial, this one's a monomial. That dot is the expression that we use for times instead of an x, so things don't get confusing because x happens to be one of the variables here. When we multiply these together, the way we do that is to multiply each variable separately and to multiply the coefficients times each other. So in this case, we'd multiply the 12 times the 3, those are the two coefficients. We would multiply the x's, so x cubed times x squared. And when we do that, we add their exponents. We'd multiply y to the power 4 times y to the power negative 2. And when you multiply, that means adding exponents if they have the same variable. And finally, we'd multiply z times z squared. And multiplying means that we add their exponents, 1 plus 2. That's the answer. That's how you multiply monomials. If you would like to pause for a moment and try these out, check to see if your answer is correct. I'll wait for a few seconds and then put up the answers. And this one here, this is the answer, although probably in the most correct form, you'd write it this way. If you have something to the power 0, you don't write it at all. And if you have something to the power 1, then you just write the variable. There's the answer for number 2, the answer for number 3. And again, there's one extra step, because if there's a negative exponent, it has to be rewritten in the denominator so that it remains positive. And what I would write here is just a. I wouldn't write the 1 anymore. All right. Next, multiplying a monomial by a polynomial. A polynomial is an expression that has two or more terms. If I'm going to multiply this expression, which has two terms, times this one, which is a monomial that has 1, the way I do that is to multiply this times this term first. So this one that's outside multiplies this first term, and that follows the same rule that we just saw about multiplying monomials. So I would multiply the coefficients, multiply the x's, and multiply the y's. For variables, that means adding exponents of the variable that is the same. Next, I would look at the sign. So over here, there's a plus, and this doesn't have a sign, which means that it's positive 3x. So this positive and this positive means that I will have a positive. If one of those two signs was negative, I would have a negative sign in there. And finally, I would multiply this outside term by the other term in here. And again, that's a multiplication of two monomials. We just reviewed how to do that. I'll multiply the coefficients, and then I'll add the exponents of the variables that are the same. So 12 x cubed, y to the power 5. And that overall is the answer. That's the product of this monomial times this binomial. So again, if you want to pause, try these out. I'll put the answers up and you can check to see if you were correct. Here we go. Answer 1. Answer 2. This one here, because there's a negative exponent, would be rewritten in the denominator. And finally, multiplying two binomials. Probably you're familiar with this acronym. It's probably the way you were taught this. FOIL stands for first, outer, inner, and last. So what does that mean? What does that look like? Well, imagine if you had two binomials. A binomial is a polynomial with two terms. So this has two different terms in it. They're separated with a plus. This has two terms separated by a minus. If you multiply them, which is typically shown just by writing the two brackets next to each other. You don't need a dot or an x between them. Two brackets that are stuck next to each other means that they are multiplied. If we go through that acronym or rule, the F in FOIL stands for first. We are looking at the two first terms in their respective brackets, first term and first term, and we multiply them. And that follows the same rule that we followed when we were multiplying any monomials. That becomes 10x to the power 4. I add the exponents, because there are two x's, and I multiply 5 times 2. The O in FOIL stands for outer or outside. And so we're looking at the two outermost, the two outside terms of the brackets, meaning that they are the ones all the way towards the out, the left and the right. And we multiply those two, and again, following the same rule of following monomials, that's our next term. The I in FOIL stands for inner or inside, and those are the two innermost terms, the ones that are stuck on the inside of the 4. And we multiply those the same way we would multiply any two monomials. And finally, the L in FOIL stands for last. They are the two last terms. It's the last one in each of the two brackets. The last term here and the last term here. And we multiply those two together. So those are the 4 terms that come from the 4 letters in the acronym FOIL. What I would do after coming up with all of those is I would check to see if there are any like terms. In this case, there are. These two here are like terms. Typically, if you have like terms, they're the middle terms. But you would always check to see if you have like terms, and we can combine those like terms, and that's the answer. This is the product of this multiplication of 2 binomials. So finally, if you would like to try to see if you really understood, here are a couple of examples. I encourage you to pause for a minute, try it on your own. Here's the answer to the first one. There are like terms, as there are here. I will group them together, combine them. And the answer is there already. But this is an important reminder that if you have one binomial squared, what that really means is 2x minus 5 times 2x minus 5. So that is a product of 2 binomials, and I would FOIL that. This is what I would end up with, and when I group the like terms, this is what I get. And that's it.